everyone. I'm Phoenix Amara, and here today on Temple Talks, Transmissions from the New Earth. I'm here with Andrea Wilson. Andrea helps people connect to their divine inner wisdom and initiate them back into their essence through art, embodiment practices, sacred rituals, ancestral healing, and cellular and DNA level healing. Thanks so much for being with us here today, Andrea. It's been such a blessing to be able to have your story and your voice to share with everyone around the maiden archetype and around the transition from the maiden to the erotic woman. And you have quite a really unique story to share. And so I'm wondering if you can just maybe briefly begin to share with the listeners and share with all of us the pieces to your story that I didn't introduce you with. And a big part of the journey from what I've known of you is that you've made quite a transition from coming from a religious organization and being brought up in religion to coming back home to your body, coming back home to your pleasure, and reconnecting to divinity through spirituality and through the goddess. So can you maybe begin to share with us a little bit more about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. Yeah, so I grew up in religion, and that formed a lot of like what I considered spirituality, and also how I connected with my body, or actually how I didn't connect with my body, because that was a big part of Mormonism specifically. Is it really was a huge barrier between the connection with myself and my body, and really the potential of my being. And I kind of had I guess you could say, a hard start at life. I don't view it that way anymore, even though I used to, because I was raped sexually at the age of 3, and by both a male and a female. And so I feel that that automatically, from a very young age, disconnected me so deeply from my body in ways that I wouldn't even know or process until very much later in my years, when my mother remarried. And she remarried a man who essentially introduced her deeper into Mormonism. And yeah, I do feel that from even before religion, there was already a connection between me and my body and sexuality, and just a lot of trauma that my body held. And Mormonism just really became, I guess, the perfect cocoon to hold all of that in and deepen, that whole disconnection. And yeah.
Mm. Interesting that you say it became this cocoon that kind of helped deepen the disconnection. And so I can imagine there was a moment for you, in, I guess, your young adulthood, where like what was the point that kind of broke you open and you're like, something needs to shift with the relationship with my body, the relationship with my sexuality, and coming to terms and healing this trauma that that I experienced. What was that moment for you?
Yeah, that was definitely in around my 20s. I had gotten married at the age of 20, as most young girls do in the Mormon church. Like, it's very, if you're not married by the age of 22, it's like, what are you doing wrong in your life? And so, I got married at the age of 20. I was in a super abusive marriage, and I didn't know really who to go to. There's a lot of sexual abuse. So I feel that even then I was very disconnected from the trauma of my earlier childhood. And it wasn't actually until I left the marriage that it felt like everything from that marriage, came out to be fully seen, fully into consciousness. And with it, my entire childhood. It just came full swing And and that led me, I was in a very fragmented place. I was in a very dark place. I struggled for a lot of years with suicide, anxiety, and really just super disconnected from my body, disconnected from really everything. And the best way I can describe it is I was just super fragmented, and so that was what essentially led me into needing to figure out what was wrong with me, because I would have, these suicide episodes and also like anxiety, PTSD, and I would come out of them and be like, I don't want this. Like, I actually want to live. I'm so afraid when I go into that place, and so that was what led me to seek help. And I went through therapy for a lot of years. And at the same time, I actually found some women in my ward in my church who were doing secretly were doing energy work because that's like a big part of the Mormon religion, is like we can't really practice any of these any ancient form of spirituality, ancestral healing, energy work. That all, like, you will get excommunicated from the church. Literally will get excommunicated from the church, and like your temple blessings will be removed from you, and so these women were practicing energy work, and ancestral healing was a big part of that.
Mm.
And I just I was like, okay, I need the help. So let's go into it. And that was really what started this connection between me and spirituality without religion, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Wow. Wow. And I'm sure there's so many people that can relate to, feeling disconnected from their bodies, regardless of being in a religion or not. But I remember us having this really potent conversation and you sharing a little bit more about like questioning like where are all of the female messiahs, or where are all like the feminine um, goddess aspects in this church. Was Can you maybe share a little bit more about that, and like did that start to kind of pop you open to be like, wait a minute, something's not quite right here?
Yeah. So from, I would say from 2014 all the way to about 2019, 2020 even, I my work was a lot of focus on like energy work. And then around 2019, 2020, I started to really question that exactly of I've never had a good relationship with my mother. She has just never been somebody who has wanted to take responsibility for her own healing journey, or for, just be emotionally available to be there for me as a mother. And I was going through a really hard time and a hard experience in my marriage where I really needed a woman in my life. Like, I needed a mother so badly, and I didn't have any of that. And all of the women around me in my religion, they were actually just so unrelatable. They were so unrelatable. And so I started questioning, like, who do I go to for this feminine need that I need? Like, I need a mother. I need that feminine touch. I need to just cry into a woman's arms and be seen and be held. And in Mormonism specifically, it's such a patriarchal religion. Like, we women literally have to go through a man for like their ordinances and their salvation. And anything that I needed to discuss with someone always was with a man first, right? And so it was then that I started to really feel from my heart, really, this like, there has to be more. And the women around me were either unrelatable or just so not in touch with their feminine, right? And actually functioning, now that I know more, from a very wounded masculine. And so that was what got me kind of thinking, where do I go to? Like, why is this heavenly mother? Because it is talked about in Mormonism, but we're told she's too sacred to talk about. So it's like, if I
Okay.
can,
uh,
yeah.
uh. And so you were like, where do I go to? And so then
Yeah.
what happened from that point? Did you start to be like, okay, something needs to happen?
Yeah. So there's actually this thing where she's too sacred to be talked about. And also, we are not allowed to pray to her. We're not allowed to pray to her. We're not allowed to talk about her, even within our church. Like, we can't bring her up, right? And so it's like, because then you get into like, you're an apostate and you need to be like reprimanded by the church. It's wild. But what I started doing is I started to say, kind of like, screw it, I'm going to pray to her, and nobody has to know. Like, nobody's going to know that I'm praying to
Stop
a
police
heavenly
around.
mother.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I started to pray, and I started to say, if there is any feminine deity, if there is any woman, like, I need you in my life. I need this, I need something bigger than this. And then from there on, I just really started actually questioning a lot of the teachings of the church.
Oof, oof.
But I think that was the biggest thing, is that my heart just told me, she can't be too sacred to talk about. You need this desperately. And if she is a deity and she is sacred, why wouldn't you also be? And why couldn't you communicate with her?
Mm, mm. Ooh, I'm getting all these chills through my body as we're talking about this, because when women are really understanding the long history of religion and understanding how, I mean, even a lot of temples today and churches are built actually on top of old
Yeah.
sacred temples devoted to the goddess, like,
Yeah.
to really understand, and matriarchy too as well is can equally be seen as like the disconnected, from the wholeness, right? We do need both parts, and that is part of the, it's not matriarchy or patriarchy, but the patriarchy, man, like, has cut off that sense of like the fullness of the feminine, where, I mean, even too, like, you know the Mary Magdalene taught that, she was a virgin and was impregnated, like the disconnection to sexuality, because when someone's in their power, they can't be coerced. When someone's actually connected to their life force, their kundalini, which is their sexuality and their
Yeah.
sexual energy, you can't be coerced, and you have direct connection to God and spirit and the goddess.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
have to go through someone else, and that's where the church gets all of its life force, power, energy from. And
Yeah.
so, as we're seeing the transition with the Gaia grids happening on the planet, like women taking back their power from these religious
Mhm.
institutions, I want to now skip to this part in your journey where, you've started to crack open to your spirituality, and you started to crack open to, earth magic, and your own inner wisdom, and the inner wisdom of your pleasure. Maybe bring us along a journey of like what started to happen, because I know you're a painter, you're an artist, you also do ancestral healing, and just maybe speak to some of those aspects.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such a beautiful, like, thing to realize, that really a lot of religions and temple worship nowadays is very much coming from this like deeper background. And yeah, I think that for me, the one of the biggest things that also, I guess at that time, even though I had gone through a lot of therapy and I had done a lot of energy work, one of the key missing pieces was that I still was not, even in therapy, like, we would address all these other childhood things, but it never went deep into the sexual trauma. Like, nobody wanted to address the rape that I had experienced. And I was dissociating. Like, I was dissociating to a very large kind of like end of the spectrum.
Mm.
And I was trying EMDR therapy, but I feel that a lot of my therapists didn't quite understand what exactly I was going through, even those who were so educated in like EMDR, and they had amazing benefits in my life in other areas, but there were things that they simply couldn't answer for me. And I think that it's because I do see that, I love um, psychology. I appreciate it. I have such a deep gratitude for it. And I feel that often there is this important piece and aspect of it that has to push us further than what we can logically understand and what logically makes sense and what is like taught in schools, right? And so that's the part where my inner wisdom, this initiation really into my inner wisdom, that that there was something bigger. There was something that others couldn't provide for me. And so I had to go into myself. And the way that I found that was through my sexuality and reclaiming my body as my own, and reclaiming the pain and the experiences that other people were maybe too afraid to hear or listen to or know what to do with. And that pushed me into this, like, I need help with my sexuality. I need help with healing my sexual trauma. And I'm not finding that in psychology. I'm not finding that in therapy. I'm not finding that through praying to God. And so I really need that help. So I actually started to be introduced to um to women who were talking about, like, the rose lineages and this work around Mary Magdalene and reclaiming your sexuality. And it seemed like, okay, this is interesting, but I needed something a little bit, like, I wasn't ready to touch that subject yet of Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ and who he could have been. I just wasn't ready at that point. I had just left religion. I was feeling like I can't get into something else like that.
Yeah.
And that's actually when I found you. That's actually when I found your work. Was I was going through, just really going deep into my sexual trauma, and I found your work, and I found that um, it spoke of this, like, liberation within your body. And ever since then, I feel that that has, led me to this quantum leap that I experienced, was when I started to really be able to understand my body and reclaim, like, the beauty of it and the pleasure of it and the bliss that I can experience through it. Yeah.
Mm, beautiful, Andrea. Yeah. What a journey too. I mean, you're pretty fresh out of that experience, and to find the resources that you need. And it's interesting too that you mentioned that even a lot of therapists didn't realize, or weren't able to notice the pieces that were missing and provide resources. And I think that
Mhm.
speaks to the level of embedded shame in our culture in
Yeah.
general around addressing sexual trauma, which really, again, if 3 out of 4 women, and I think the stats are far higher, I think it's one
Yeah.
out of every 3 or 4 men have experienced some form of sexual trauma. It needs to be a conversation that we can hold, without shame, and to normalize it more so that we can actually heal it, right? And that's the biggest piece, is that, if there's so much shame already just covering being able to talk about it or open that up, then how can we address it as a whole, as a society? Because it's my goal, and it's part of my life vision, to see it eradicated, right, in
Yeah.
my lifetime, because it's just so unnecessary, right? Like, sexual trauma is so unnecessary
Yeah.
when we start to bring in consent. But even still in schools, like, we see I don't know what they're teaching now in schools, but the lack of
Yeah.
sexual knowledge and consent training it's kind of appalling. And so
Yeah.
it's on us as adults to really start to do that healing so that we can pass it
Yeah.
on. Um, can you maybe share a few practices, for you, Andrea, maybe like artistic, um, or embodiment practices for you that really, maybe for those listeners out there that maybe who have gone through sexual trauma or know someone who's gone through that, can maybe take some inspiration from, like, what were some practices for you that really, like, helped you open up to maybe addressing the anger that was there, or melting the numbness and coming into
Yeah.
pleasure or healing? Yeah.
Yeah. It did actually start with art. I actually started with watercolors, and watercolors are super hard. So I was like, I don't think this is the medium that I need to be working with. But it did start with art in that way. And then I expanded into, art in the form of acrylics. And it really was just, this was a little bit before I found your work and more going into sexuality. And so I was mostly just putting out all of my emotions. I would just let them run through me and put them into paint and put them into a canvas and express a range wide of emotions. And I did it at the beginning through a lot of color. I've transitioned now into more. It's actually interesting because I feel this is like also my transition from maiden into this empowered, erotic woman, because it was very much colorful at the beginning. I used a lot of colors, and I am from Mexico, so I feel that that was, influential, like, the colorful. But then it's now transitioned into like darker colors and lots of reds and oranges and just like more, the sexuality, like the pleasure, the lower chakras. And so um, the next big piece to that while I was working with art is that I also was introduced to sacred medicines. And it was actually during one of those journeys that I just felt like I needed to get naked in front of a mirror. And I was laughing and crying and just really realizing how deeply disconnected I was. Even then, even after a lot of therapy, even after the paintings, and even after all of that, I was still so disconnected from the physical. Because I feel like I had done a lot of work in the upper chakras. I had done a lot of work with the unseen. I had not fully come back into this body, this physical vessel temple that held memory and information, and so I was brought to that during a sacred journey with medicines, and I was fully naked in front of a mirror, and that was actually one of the practices that really deepened my connection. I just kept doing it over and over. Even when I wasn't on a journey with medicines, I just would look at myself in the mirror, and I would speak love to every part of me, and really, really deeply see every part of me, especially the parts that didn't want to be seen, and that I was scared of, that I was ashamed of. And, I would just practice that. Like, how, how TMI do we want to get? But like, I have like darker underarms as like a brown woman, but I would just like, look at my underarms and be like, I love you. Every part of you is perfect. Every part of you is divine. Every part of you, and I would just speak this love into my body. And I think that then it started to turn more into like, I kind of started getting turned on by myself, right? By like my reflection, like, hey, I'm this amazing looking body, and like this is, and then it started moving more into like movement in front of a mirror, and really like in my hips, and doing these like swirling movements, and I got turned on by myself, right? And so
Beautiful.
um yeah.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. And so, what I'm hearing is that you went from a full like journey in that spectrum from being totally disconnected, and when people are, disconnected, sometimes you don't even realize like that you're
Yeah.
disconnected, right? Like it's very much etheric. You're in kind of the space of being disconnected from sensation. And oftentimes, and when we've been through trauma, and I've talked to a lot of people that have been through like traumatic experiences, either sexual or physical or emotional. You disconnect from the body in order, as it's a survival mechanism. And so it's not a
Yeah.
bad thing to be disconnected,
Yeah.
because oftentimes it's the only way that someone can actually be able to comprehend what they've been through, right?
Yeah.
And part of the process of being able to come back into the body is coming back and knowing that it's safe for you to come back in. And so I just want to presence this with listeners is that, these embodiment practices are really to start to create safety in the body.
Mhm.
Um, can you speak a little bit to, I guess, in your journey of healing with your sexuality, what was that piece around starting to create boundaries with your body in terms of like
Yeah.
the way that it's touched, or listening to your body and being like, hey, you know what? I don't actually feel comfortable engaging sexually right now. Or, like really listening to your body at that fine, subtle level, whether someone's in a relationship or not. Because oftentimes, someone can be in a relationship and there can be like this embedded, I like to call it like embedded consent, where,
Yeah.
you feel like just because you're in a relationship, you need to have sex with your partner. And I think it's really important for women, especially, to realize that, like, you don't owe your partner sex. And sometimes things will shift and change in a relationship. Like sometimes you
Yeah.
might go through a period of like, actually, I need to be with just me. Can you
Yeah.
maybe speak to that a little bit?
where women thrive in sisterhood, sacred business, soul-led purpose, and sacred sexuality. The Queen's Council is a container devoted to the intimate magic of queenship, soul, sex, magic, and the goddess. Together we weave a coven to hold our wildest dripping pleasure as magic oozes from our souls, cascading into the world like the ambrosia nectar of the divine. If you're ready to become a confident, embodied woman running your feminine-led empire from a place of spaciousness, wild creativity, alignment, and pleasure, the Queen's Council is opening up applications. Experience a radical and loving relationship with money and prosperity, wildly thriving and living your visions for your most beautiful life. Because being a queen in your life means setting higher standards for your pleasure, your purpose, and prosperity. As a mystic, visionary artist, or healer here on the planet to shift the collective trajectory, you're ready for a massive shift internally in how you be in the world. So step into your queenship surrounded by other women who are setting a higher standard for how they create and manifest in the world. Applications open now, and we start in November.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful question, and really, I want to talk so openly about that because I do believe that. I do believe that I had that, like embedded beliefs around like, oh, well, we're married, so I automatically have to be doing this. And not that my partner was demanding of it, but I didn't know that I had the power to say no. And that did go a lot deeper into, I mean, I was 3 and not able to say no. So I've never been able to say no. And the reclaiming of that actually started, oddly enough, with food first, like my body really listening to the things that my body didn't want, even healthy things. It was just like, no, we don't, like, that's not something that my body wanted. And then I think that that was like a gentle transition into then listening deeper into, um, I mean, even from the beginning of my relationship now with my current partner, the first night that we had sex as a married couple, I went into a PTSD flashback of my rape. And that was like the beginning of our sexual intimacy, was him experiencing that for the first time with a woman who had already been married before and had all of this sexual trauma in her body. He had no idea what to do with it, and I had no idea what to do with it. And we just got really enmeshed and entangled sexually in some really, really wounded ways. And then there was a lot of shame from the church, right, around his sexuality as a man and in a patriarchal religion. And so our experience together sexually has just kind of always felt really wounded and really distorted. And so I started to actually feel that I couldn't have sex with him. And it wasn't anything that, and I went about this in a very gentle way because I want to be mindful of the fact that he is a human being with feelings and with a heart. And so going about this in a very gentle way, but also in a way that honored my body, that my body was telling me every time we have sex with another person, like, it's re-traumatizing. And I would just start crying, and I would just go back into these flashbacks, and I was like, I can't keep doing that to my body. Like, my body is so deeply just begging me to listen and to just go slow. And that has really pushed me into a deeper intimacy with myself first. But I did have to actually voice that, even in my marriage, that we've been married for 6 years, and I had to say that. I had to say, I can't have sex with you. And let's use this as an initiation for both of us to reclaim our sexuality and reclaim our bodies. What is your body telling you, right? What is my body telling me? And how can we work this together into like deeper intimacy without it becoming full on sex? Because my body just didn't want that.
Oh, thank you so much, Andrea, for just speaking openly and again, I'm getting these like goosebumps, like soul bumps, I call them, because it's when there's a really important message to be shared. And so just, I know that a lot of people are going to find value and insight into their own healing journey with their sexuality. And I just want to speak for a minute to healing distortions, because again, just a presence that where we're at in society and humanity is that most people have had very little genuine sexual education. And so most of their sexual education comes from modalities such as porn. And this is not to bring shame to the conversation around porn. It is to speak to the fact that a lot of porn that is online now is very violent.
Yeah.
It's not real depictions of people in relationships and loving relationships. And also to that, a lot of it is filmed through a patriarchal lens. So it's mostly on male pleasure. It's very fast often. And
Yeah.
so as we're healing kind of like the relationship with our sexuality, a lot of times we have to heal the distortions of like kind of attuning and calibrating our energy, our sexual energy to what we've seen in porn and coming into tune with our own flow and rhythm. And for a woman, a lot of times there's a deep process of like listening to like understanding what that even is, right? And so
Yeah.
just for women, and I think you've kind of spoken to this without speaking to it, that the feminine can initiate the
Yeah.
masculine into this new realm of like, and it's actually deeper pleasure, right? And it's deeper intimacy because you're actually going to be more present and focused and listening versus our egos being like, oh, well, this is how this sexual experience needs to look, right? Which is often coming from these informed
Yeah.
places from porn or, whatever our earliest sexual experiences have been. Is there any last words that you wish to share to, women who are maybe embarking on a healing journey, either from trauma or from a religion, or just wanting to find deeper intimacy with their bodies? Is there any final message to those, or even to men, or like what would be a message that you would just want to impart to those who are listening today?
Yeah. I think first of all, I would definitely say I love you, and I understand the depths of this journey, and the highs and the lows, and really one of my biggest things now is really reclaiming my stories around that. And I had a lot of moments where I needed to feel all of the pain, and I needed to feel you know all of the hard from it. And then it's like I rose into this, how can i how can I look at these experiences for like, just how can those experiences, the pain and the abuse and all of that, just be a catalyst for a deeper connection with my being and with others. And so I would say honoring the place that you're in. If you are in the place where you need to have a lot of anger and hatred and disconnection from your body and from others, honor that. And maybe also understand that there will come a point where it can be transmuted into a lot of light and into a very empowered place, which is where I am at now. And but I had to honor all of those parts of me. And so really deeply honoring the parts of us that are so human, and the parts of us that do hold a lot of trauma and a lot of emotions, and we don't always understand everything, and really honoring that. And also just like, if I could sum up what I needed in therapy all those years, it really is that I wish that I could have just I actually wished a lot of the times that I could have just had my therapist, that I could just be naked in front of her, that I could have an orgasm in front of her, and that I could show her what the PTSD flashback looked like, and just be held by her, and be held by her in my nakedness with safe touch. And that is like my big vision for the new earth and the new paradigm, is a place where people can come and we can reclaim touch as this form of safety and healing, like beauty and perfection that it is, right? And reclaim these spaces where people come and explore, including those who have, I have my dark sexual shadows too. And so where we can come and explore those and have safe places where we can talk openly about our sexuality and the depths of it, and just be held, and be held so that we can alchemize, and be held so that we can, transmute these things and turn them into a place of empowerment, and to a place of love, really. And yeah, that's my big vision for what I want to create, and the reason that I'm doing the work that I do.
Woo! I feel that transmission from the new earth, and just by presencing it, it's already landing in the collective. So thank you for being an oracle and a conduit for that, Andrea. And you are such a remarkable, visionary, inspirational woman in fully sharing with love your story and your truth and your message. And what I've really heard through this is the reconciliation from the experiences that you've had. You have transformed them and alchemized them into gold now. And I think that is a message of hope for those who've been through similar situations, that not in running away from the part of your past, it's part of you now. It's part of what's made you, and now how to alchemize that. So, for those listeners who are really desiring to learn more about how to alchemize their own past, or how to come into deeper parts of their pleasure and their art and their healing, where can people find out more about you and your work?
So on my website, it's andreawilson.art. And I have some beautiful offerings there. And my new website is under construction, but I'll have very beautiful free things available to people also, because that is my biggest thing is I want people to love their bodies. I want people to experience safe touch from themselves to themselves, and it can go into orgasms or not. It can go into just bliss. It can go into just hugging yourself, however that looks for you, and honoring your body. I just want every single person on this planet to experience that.
Thank you so much again, Andrea, for being with us here today on Temple Talks. That's Andrea Wilson on Temple Talks, Transmissions from the New Earth. And thank you for joining us here today.